Well, Keefe D said he told Rat James that, look, it's big money in this. Only thing Puffy want to do is pay $1 million to have both of them. He told me that.
Las Vegas. The Strip never sleeps, but on September 7, 1996, it was about to witness a moment that would freeze the world. Picture it, neon flickers off the black hood of a BMW 750 sedan, weaving through the gridlocked afterglow of a Mike Tyson fight. Shakur, just 25, sits in the passenger seat, all Versace silk and gold. An icon already, even if he can't know what's coming. Suge Knight is at the wheel, bigger than life, and for the first time in a long time, out of control. Behind them, a convoy of death row muscle snakes through traffic, shadows trailing the stars. It's just before 11 p.m. They pull up to a light at Flamingo and Koval. No one sees the white Cadillac until it's right there. Window rolling down, pulse in the air. Then a semi-automatic flashes. 13 shots crash through the night. 4 hit Shakur, chest, arm, thigh. Suge's head is grazed. The car swerves, and suddenly the future of hip-hop is bleeding out under the strobe of police lights and sirens.
Suge Knight has never identified anyone who was in the car that night that him and Tupac.
This is the version we've been fed for nearly 3 decades, a random act, a byproduct of chaos between feuding gangs, East Coast egos versus West Coast muscle. But now, from the hard echo of a prison cell, comes the kind of claim that rewrites everything. According to Suge Knight's own former cellmate, this wasn't just a drive-by. It was a boardroom execution, signed off and financed at the highest levels of the music industry. He says Shakur was marked not by random street vendetta, but by a deliberate corporate strike, engineered to rid the system of a voice that refused to be tamed, all the blood, all the spectacle. It was just the last act of a backroom deal. Now we have to face a darker question. Who actually profits when a rebel artist is silenced? Who sits quietly while the press runs wild with stories of rivalries, knowing they're watching a billion-dollar brand get tighter, leaner, more controllable? Suge's cellmate isn't selling your standard prison gossip. He's describing a machine. And as he tells it, Shakur's last night was less about gangland retribution than about restoring corporate order to a world that made too many people too much money to risk disruption.
I believed him because he wasn't talking just to be talking. I felt he was also coming straight because there was a big war behind that. A war that they lost. And I think it was a war that destroyed their neighborhood.
The story starts to look less like gangster folklore and more like a true crime procedural. We've got Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the last living suspect from the Cadillac that night, now awaiting trial after being indicted in 2024. The police files, real, tangible, entered into court say Davis told investigators as far back as 2009 that Sean Diddy Combs, the bad boy kingpin, put out $1 million bounty on Shakur and Suge Knight. Those are his words, $1 million. Davis says Diddy needed to get rid of Knight and Shakur. Prosecutors claim Diddy's name is sprinkled 77 times through their filings. It's all in the record. Transcripts, informant deals, grand jury exhibits. Suddenly, we're not dealing in whispers, but in deposition, the kind that makes A-list lawyers start sweating. But then the rug gets yanked out from under us. Diddy himself has never been charged. He's denied everything, over and over, calling the whole thing pure fiction. And the Las Vegas Metro Police say on the record that he has never been considered a suspect. So, why does his name keep floating back to the surface, like a body that refuses to stay buried? This is the tension that warps the whole story. When the powerful get accused, but never even face handcuffs, it's not closure, it's a breeding ground for paranoia.
He was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get popped.
Listen to Suge Knight's voice as he calls out from his cell in California. The man's been locked up for a fatal hit and run, serving 28 years, but he's still got that bruised, bitter clarity. In his words, everybody knows where $1 million came from. You can hear it, disbelief, resignation, a kind of raw acceptance. What does it take for a man like Suge to finally stop protecting people? Because that's what his former cellmate claims. Suge is done running interference, and if the last dominoes fall, the industry's dirtiest secrets won't just be whispered, they'll be shouted.
And good thing he didn't, because even though we was friends, but if a pays you, I got a bullet into my skull. And one of the best friends I ever had in life is Pac.
Rewind to that September night. Suge, scalp streaming with blood, yanked Shakur from the front seat as bullets cracked the windshield. Even now, he remembers the moment with brutal detail. The chaos of sirens, the weight of Shakur's body, the seatbelt he has to claw loose. They make it to the ambulance, where Shakur, bleeding, broken, cracks jokes about healing up and getting back to business. It's the gallows humor of men who have lived with fatal threats so long they treat them like bad weather. Later, in the hospital, Shakur is up and talking, asking for 2 blunts and maybe some Hennessy. In Suge's telling, Shakur even grabs him close, says, "I love you," and the world goes on spinning for just a little while longer. But if this was a corporate hit, not a street beef, then the horror sharpens. Suge wasn't just collateral, he was a target too. He's the guy who lived, and that means his memories aren't just recollections, they're evidence. Imagine carrying that for nearly 30 years. The man says he can't even listen to Shakur's music anymore. Every track is a trigger.
Chaotic. It's hard to actually figure out what's what, but it's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer and clearer, but
we have to stop pretending that the night Shakur was taken out was some spontaneous eruption of violence. By the time the death row convoy peeled out of the MGM Grand parking lot, the aftershocks of what happened inside, the brawl with Orlando Anderson, the flex, the arrogance, had already set the stage for something bigger. The industry was boiling over, labels on both coasts were locking horns, and everyone was cashing checks. But in the background, players like Keefe, polished, calculating, were allegedly negotiating with middlemen for business that went far beyond record sales. The legal files say the Southside Crips weren't just avenging a beatdown. Davis allegedly gave the ultimate green light, that's court language, not just street talk, to hunt down Shakur and Suge. And the question, pressed again and again in those secret interviews, did Diddy really offer millions for the job? Keefe, sometimes reluctant, sometimes boastful, says yes. Sometimes he says the payout never arrived. Sometimes that it was funneled through Zip Martin, an LA connector who had as many music contacts as criminal ones. The only thing that doesn't change is who's at the top of the food chain. All the while, Diddy's lawyers push back, the bad boy camp stays mostly silent, and the Las Vegas police stick to their official line. But if you're looking for plausible deniability, this is how you build it. Always keep it just outside of reach. Never quite inside the courtroom, but never totally out of the headlines.
Was the incentive just revenge, or was the incentive for that supposed money that Puffy supposedly put up?
So here we are, 2025. Diddy himself is now locked up, no longer hip-hop's untouchable mogul, but a federal inmate, sentenced to more than 4 years for what the prosecutors call serious offenses. He sits in Brooklyn, stripped of his fortune, his empire in ruins. After being convicted for trafficking charges, the tabloids barely have space to print. This is not the same Diddy who danced in the videos. This is a man whose name is now mentioned 77 times in a high-profile case that never quite goes away. At the same time, Keefe's homicide trial has been pushed back to 2026, the calendar stretching out just enough to keep everyone on edge. And as for Suge Knight, he's still talking, still refusing to play the fall guy, and his former cellmate claims Suge's finally ready to let the last secret spill.
As far as, is he gonna turn people in? Is he gonna cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate, and they're gonna cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he had to, he won't get out till 70 years old. He about 70, that's when they start talking about letting him come to a halfway house.
We have to wonder, as these timelines collide, is this just coincidence or is it consequence? Are we watching the final act of a long con where the men who once called the shots from the shadows now face judgment in open court? If the guy who allegedly gave the order is finally behind bars, if the walls are closing in and the immunity of power is starting to crack, what happens next? This wasn't just violence, it was maintenance. That's what we keep circling back to, the uncomfortable truth hiding in the glitz. Shakur wasn't simply caught in a hail of bullets for nothing. His fate was handled the way a corporation handles an expense, surgically, strategically, and without a trace of regret. At the time of his passing, Shakur was reportedly plotting his exit from Death Row Records, loaded with unreleased tracks, film contracts, and potential revenue streams worth hundreds of millions. He was about to take the crown and all the profits somewhere else. For Death Row, for Bad Boy, for every executive riding the wave of 90s hip-hop, this wasn't just a headache. It was an existential threat to the cash flow. According to Suge's cellmate, the decision was cold, not passionate. Keep the empire safe, even if it means a spectacle on the strip.
So let's talk about it, man. So you feel like it was bigger than Orlando shooter Pac. You feel like it's more to the story. You don't think it was that simple?
I feel like it's bigger because
The narrative that gripped the media, the so-called gangland grudge match, turns out to be the best cover story money could buy. Because if the world sees a rivalry, a brawl, a retaliatory hit, then no one's peeking behind the curtain at the balance sheets. We can't ignore what was happening behind those platinum records and magazine covers. Shakur was outgrowing the role assigned to him, starting to believe in his own legend, and talking openly about leaving Knight's orbit. If Shakur walked, the music, the movies, the influence, all of it might slip right through Death Row's hands. And on the other side, Bad Boy's whole brand had become a shadowboxing act against West Coast defiance. Who benefited most if the wildest rebel vanished from the game before he could rewrite the rules? That's why, even as bullets sprayed through glass and flesh, the real power struggle was taking place far from the Vegas asphalt. The East Coast-West Coast feud looked messy, sounded dangerous, but to those cashing the checks, it was an alibi. We remember Suge taking the stage at the 1995 Source Awards, not just taunting, but gutting Diddy in public. Any artist out there that want to be an artist and stay a star and don't have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record, dancing, come to Death Row, that was the moment the gloves came off. And a year later, Shakur lit the fuse with Hit 'Em Up, calling out Diddy and Biggie by name, torching every bridge with a single track.
On your own platform, he said this on your platform that he put up $1 million to get Pac in.
Yeah, correct. He was around Puffy and Puffy made a comment.
Now buried in those police transcripts, we find Keefe D, the last surviving suspect from the Cadillac, allegedly telling investigators that Diddy himself said, "I'd give anything for that dude's head." It's the kind of line that echoes through myth and memory, and whether it's bravado or confession, it doesn't matter. It's out there now, part of the public record. Of course, Diddy calls it nonsense, pure fabrication, nothing to see here, and yet the details pile up. The court filings, the memoirs, the surreptitious tapes, Davis repeating his story in interviews and on paper. Every time this rumor gets stamped out, it flares up again, because the more people talk, the more sense the pieces start to make. So if we're following the money, we have to see who didn't just survive the bloodbath, but thrived. Suge himself has said the loss shattered his trust in everyone around him so deeply that he walked away from music. After Shakur's passing, I exited the music business, he admitted. I lost trust in so many people. I lost trust in hip-hop. For him, there was nothing left to build, just wreckage to sift through. But for everyone who stayed, the revenues kept rolling. The catalogs were suddenly more valuable, the streaming rights and reissues suddenly golden. Bad Boy grew even bigger, Death Row staggered on, and the machine that took Shakur apart kept humming, unbothered.
He just walked in, bro. Walked in with a cigar by himself. Alicia Keys started.
There's a strange symmetry in how power turns on itself, and nowhere is that clearer than in Suge Knight's long stretch behind bars. Once the most feared man in hip-hop, Suge watched from a concrete cell as the industry he helped create began to cannibalize itself. The artists who once begged for his protection, the moguls who built their legacies on borrowed muscle, all of them now scattered, exiled, or under federal investigation. In that vacuum, with his reputation battered, but his name still echoing in headlines, Suge has found the kind of clarity that only comes from losing everything. Each day, behind steel doors, the old kingpin faces the reality that empires built on intimidation are the first to rot from within. Isolation strips away the distractions. As scandals engulf familiar names and the world Suge once ruled dissolves into lawsuits and depositions, he's been forced to confront the ghosts that haunted his every business deal. The headlines roll in: Diddy's collapse, former allies testifying, prosecutors airing decades of dirty laundry, and Suge is left to reckon with what's left of his legacy. There's no more myth to hide behind, no entourage to prop up the image. In this final act, Suge isn't seeking redemption. He's methodically tearing down the veil he once wrapped around the business, naming the names, confirming the rumors. If the old rules demanded silence, the new world rewards the man who finally speaks.
Hey, that boy life is dangerous. His life isn't, and he's just not dangerous with the they said he was doing, but he's in danger. He knows too much.
For Suge, this is less confession and more controlled demolition. The only currency he has left is truth, or at least his version of it, and he knows exactly how dangerous that can be. It's not guilt that drives him, but the cold logic of survival. He's watched the next generation of moguls fall to the same temptations, watched the public appetite for secrets grow even sharper. In this moment, as the industry devours its own, Suge's reckoning lands with the force of a final warning. The past never really stays buried, especially when the last witness is still willing to talk. But there's another kind of silence that's even more telling: the hush in the suites, as Suge put it. According to him, no one in the industry dares speak out against Diddy, not because they fear the street, but because they fear losing their place at the table. They're not scared of the streets, they're scared of the people in the suites, Suge said, hammering home the point that it's not bullets that keep lips sealed, it's contracts and blacklists. The old rules never really changed, the only difference is now, the danger comes from above, not below, and we see it even now, as the biggest names from that era, keep their heads down, mouths zipped, as if the only thing more dangerous than the truth is being associated with it.
These 3 law firms on retainer. I don't know how much money is coming in, but I know that a lot of money is going out every single month for Diddy.
But times change, and lately the fortress looks less secure. In the last year, Diddy's own mansions were stormed by federal agents, rooms ransacked, evidence boxes hauled away under the weight of trafficking investigations. Lawsuits multiply, the headlines get longer and uglier. A former FBI agent even told the press that these raids might be linked to the old Shakur case, the kind of hint that has the whole industry shifting in its seat. No one's been charged with orchestrating the Vegas shooting, but for the first time in decades, people are whispering that law enforcement might finally be interested in who called the shots, not just who pulled the trigger.
Boom, it's all over, and we can see, how this shit fall, but that's how it is. And the reason being is because if I can't live free, if I can't live with the same respect as the next man, I don't want to be here, because God has cursed me to see what life is.
Meanwhile, Keefe D sits in custody, his trial delayed, his story already committed to print and video. He's run out of time, and maybe out of loyalty, too. The prosecutors keep pointing to his memoir, Compton Street Legend, where he maps out the night in meticulous detail, all but inviting the reader to draw their own conclusions. If Keefe D cracks, if he decides that saving himself is worth more than saving the secret, we could be looking at a collapse bigger than anything the record industry has seen in years. Through all of this, Suge Knight sits in his cell, older now, maybe a little less invincible, but still haunted by that night. He didn't have to go, he says about Shakur. That's what eats at him. The sense that Shakur's fate wasn't sealed by some random twist, but by calculation. If we believe Suge's cellmate, the men who set that night in motion aren't just relics of the past. They're still out there, orchestrating careers and signing deals, making sure nothing escapes the machine. The game never ended, the boardroom just got bigger. So here's the last bombshell. What if the story we all believed was just a smokescreen? What if the Cadillac and the gunman were only the visible edge of something deeper, something designed to make us all look the wrong way? We're left wondering, as Keefe D's trial looms and Diddy sits behind bars, if the case that haunted hip-hop for 30 years is finally unraveling, or if, even now, the real story is being kept just out of reach. What do you think? Are we about to witness the biggest truth bomb in music history, or will the industry keep its darkest secrets buried for good? Drop your wildest theories in the comments, and let's see who's brave enough to name names. Stay tuned, keep your ears open, and remember, in the music business, the quietest rooms always hold the loudest secrets. See you next time.